Good morning. My name is Scarlette.
And I'm Natalie.
And we are very excited to be here with you this morning and to share a presentation. We hope that you will find this presentation to be beneficial to you, not only as pianists, but as teachers to young students. So, by a showing of hands, how many of you consider piano to be just an emotional, artistic outlet? Raise your hands.
Nobody?
Nobody thinks it's an artistic outlet?
Not just.
How many of you would consider playing the piano to be a purely athletic activity? How many?
How many of you would consider it to be both? Everybody, okay.
Good job, guys. There are many similarities between playing the piano and athletics, such as soccer, swimming, and football. The complex integration of technical and subtle motor skills needed to perform such feats requires frequent and diligent practice. Another necessary aspect is emotional intelligence. This is the ability to communicate and perform well under pressure.
They must also have kinesthetic intelligence, which is the ability to sense the state of the body's muscles from within. For example, a gymnast must coordinate her muscle use in order to successfully complete a difficult combination. Likewise, a concert pianist must be able to use her muscles in a refined way to play technically demanding passages. Due to the nature of all these factors, there is high risk for injury. This could include a rotator cuff injury for a football player, or carpal tunnel syndrome or tendinitis for a pianist. These injuries can be detrimental to artists and athletes alike, hindering their development and ultimately their careers.
There is, however, one major difference between sports and playing the piano. Sports medicine provides athletes with unlimited scientific research and constant guidance from biomechanical experts. Athletes also have access to physical therapy and training in the basic forms of movement in their respective sports. Sports medicine helps athletes to prevent injuries of all sorts, allowing them to enhance their athletic performance and extend their careers.
Unfortunately, this cannot be said of the piano world as a whole. Pianists, like athletes, will encounter injury, pain, or discomfort at some point during their musical experience. Some injuries are so debilitating that they take away the joy and desire of playing and end performing careers. We are in our early 20s and we have already experienced pain and temporary injury.
By the time I was 18, I had already experienced tendinitis twice and had to wear arm braces on both arms. When I got to college, I realized that the root of my injury and discomfort from playing came from constant, unreleased tension, and it took away from my musicality. I wasn't aware of how to use my body at the piano, and bad habits accumulated. They aggressively surfaced when I started playing more advanced repertoire. My story isn't unique that I experienced pain as a teenager. My situation could easily apply to anyone in this room. Many pianists are afflicted with crippling injury. For example, chronic tension can lead to injuries such as tendinitis and carpal tunnel syndrome. How can we address this problem of frequent injury in pianists?
What some pianists fail to realize is that most playing-related injuries can be prevented. Some injuries are the result of bad habits and misuse or overuse of the body. Having a little knowledge of anatomy would be very helpful in dealing with these issues. Many pianists have no idea what anatomy goes into playing the piano. We need to understand that the body is the pathway of musicality. If that channel is constricted, the pianist will be at a high risk for injury, which can lead to mental and emotional frustration. Now, it is possible to be musical while playing with bad habits and unnecessary tension. We acknowledge that. But what we're trying to explore is how to achieve confident musical expression while playing with the least amount of effort.
One such person who has dedicated her life to addressing this topic is Dr. Barbara Lister-Singh. She is the author of the DVD Freeing the Caged Bird and has created an injury preventive piano method based on biomechanics. We were introduced to her method by our piano professor, Dr. Piitz, and were inspired to incorporate Dr. Lister Sink's work with our own students. Since we have a lot of younger students, we have found that most method books begin with a page or two talking about hand position, but don't really discuss how to use the body at the piano. Teachers should go beyond the hand position and address basic biomechanical principles of the body, especially when working with beginners or students of a young age. We have found that the core concepts of the Lister Sink method to be valuable not only for explaining the hand position, but also other parts of the body that we use to play the piano. We are not certified in her method, but have done our best to compile some points that we thought were important. These principles include correct body alignment and how to play piano in a comfortable and efficient way. We hope that by encouraging teachers to implement this knowledge, the next generation of pianists will be healthy and more musical.
We believe that knowledge leads to optimal and efficient use of the body, which in turn gives the pianist more freedom at the keyboard so they can more fully express their musicality. Knowledge is comprised of correct body mapping, proper alignment, and muscle awareness. According to Thomas Mark in his book, What Every Pianist Needs to Know About the Body, if you haven't read that book, it's a must read. It's so enlightening, I can't tell you what good it has done for me personally. Anyways, body mapping, according to Thomas Mark, is the concept that we move our bodies according to the way we think of them, not necessarily according to their anatomical structure and function.
For instance, point to the part of the body where you think the primary weight of your body is supported. I'm sorry. Point to the part of the spine where you think the majority of your weight is supported. Where do you think? All right. Notice that we on the screen have included a cross-section of the spine. Notice that the forward-facing part of the spine, or the rounded part of the bone, supports the weight. If we run our hand down our back, we feel that the part of the spine that houses, if we run our hand down the back, we feel the part of the spine that houses the primary nerves of the body. It is not meant to support weight at all. Mismapping your back would be thinking that since you can feel this bony part of the spine, this is where your weight belongs. This causes back problems since forcefully shifting body weight to the back constricts the nerves, causing nerve damage that results in numbness in other parts of the body.
Another example of mismapping is how we sit. What part of the body do we sit on? Some people might say that we sit on our legs, and others might say our tailbone. However, according to anatomy, we have two structures that support us while we sit. The sits bones. They enable us to rock side to side with no extra force or effort, which is great for pianists who need to quickly access the registral extremes of the keyboard. In fact, if you all could sit on the forward part of your chairs and try and feel your sits bones and rock back and forth, it should be quite easy if you're on your sits bones.
Another area that we can mention that affects the placement of the spine is the waist. We are only aware of the waist because of the fashion and diet industries, and in fact, some of our New Year's resolutions is probably to shrink our own. And so, some people believe that you've been at the waist, but the waist is not an anatomical structure of the body. Bending at the waist not only compresses the spine, but also throws the weight of the body onto the tailbone, rather than the sits bones. According to anatomy, we bend at the hip joint, where the legs meet at the pelvis. The sits bones and the spine comprise the foundation of proper alignment at the piano. This is illustrated in Figure 3. Notice the natural curves of the spines. So if someone has told you, sit with a straight back, this is actually physically impossible because your spine is not straight, it's curved. So when you say, have more alignment, make sure that you feel comfortable with the curves in your spine when you're sitting at the bench.
Teachers need to be aware of what body structures you use at the piano before you can address how to use them. Before we talked about the correct alignment of the spine, the waist, and sits bones, how many of you were aware of them? Okay, good. I'm glad that some of you were. What about consciously using them correctly? Some pianists establish personal bad habits by mismapping and misaligning themselves. This includes using and sustaining more muscle tension than needed. With time, these improper positions and unnecessary amounts of tension begin to feel normal. This is called habituation, where a person isn't aware of the state of their muscles.
How many of us go to the piano and just start playing without thinking about how we're using our body? I know I definitely do. One primary reason for this is because of visual capture, where the eyes dominate the other senses of the body. 30 to 40% of the cerebral cortex, the brain's processing center, is devoted to vision. So all of us in the room, close your eyes. Listen to the sounds of the room. Take in all the sensory details around you. Are there things that you hear that you hadn't picked up on before? When your eyes are closed, do you find that it's easier to be in tune with your other senses? Okay, open your eyes now. When you opened your eyes, how many of you noticed that you're no longer focused on those other things you noticed before? Exactly.
The same thing can happen when a pianist sight reads. How many of you have ever felt tense or found yourselves in uncomfortable positions while you were sight reading? This is because your visual sense is overriding your awareness of the body's muscles. You may not be aware of the following: raised shoulders, or the engagement of the shoulder elevators, including the upper trapezius, which is pictured on the screen. This is the pianist's tension specialty. Everyone do that. Really tightly raise your shoulders. That's engaging your trapezius. And release. Great. There's also jutted arms, or the engagement of the triceps and medial deltoid. Release. Or you can turn around. Or tight forearms. This is the result of simultaneous contractions of the wrist extensors and flexors. These areas, already susceptible to muscle tension and discomfort, could be denied sensory focus because of the effect of visual stimuli on the brain. In order to regain sense of our muscles and how to use them, we have to have correct body mapping. In order to have correct body mapping, we need to have a fundamental knowledge of anatomy and muscle function.
Now that we are informed of the main structural building blocks of the body and how to be aware of them, we can apply this knowledge to optimal and efficient use of the body. In order to help a pianist release unnecessary tension, it is useful to have a system of tuning into different areas of the body. In her method, Dr. Lister Sink has developed a mindful process of tuning into the body before playing the piano, which she calls Cue Sheet 1. It is shown on the screen and it is also included in your handout. Notice the terminology used. Nothing is forced, but rather allowed to happen, a concept promoted by the Alexander technique. Let's do it together. Natalie will do it at the piano. So first, we observe our breathing. Breathing is the fundamental thing as human beings. Sometimes we forget how to do it, or that we are doing it. And then next, we balance our torso and our sitting bones. So this large structure right here in the middle of your body is your torso, and you want to align with your sitting bones. That way you're allowed to rock back and forth. And then allow your spine to gently lengthen up and down. Remember, it's not straight, but lengthened. So your natural curves are in line. Next, allow your shoulders to remain released. So all of us go up with our shoulders again, and then release them. And that's how you know for sure that your shoulders are released. And then you free your neck of any unnecessary tension, so you just go side to side, and then massage around here and there. Yeah. And then you balance your head lightly on your torso. So you imagine your head as if it were a helium balloon. Next, you allow your upper arms to hang into gravity, supported by the torso. You can swing them around to be sure that they're completely free and pendulous. Next, sense your hands and fingers resting on your thighs. So you bring your hands up to your lap, And then sense your feet supported by the floor. Don't press your feet into the floor, but rather the floor is a footstool for you. And then allow your legs to fall gently apart. Next, you maintain the kinesthetic awareness of everything we just did. And then remember how to breathe. Observe your breathing.
Dr. Lister-Sink recommends that her students return to this process frequently while playing in order to promote proper alignment and muscle awareness. Following optimal alignment, these guiding principles can be extended to start playing at the keyboard. In her method, Dr. Lister-Sink has created the concept of a basic stroke. This is a tool to help a pianist regain the feeling of easily playing one note efficiently, using only the amount of muscle tension necessary. Since most pianists have forgotten what that feeling is like, it takes some time to develop the sensation of ease and freedom. Because the basic stroke is a core concept of her method, it needs to be carefully monitored to make sure that the pianist is fully released. Only certified Lister-Sink method teachers who are properly instructed can demonstrate and teach this to students. Of course, we want to make it very clear that you cannot play without tension. If Scarlette and I tried to play without tension, we would be on the floor. That would be our recital. We would just be hanging out on the floor. However, we can reduce the amount of muscle tension we use to play the piano and need to incorporate this in our music. This will not only free the pianist physically, but also make playing more fun.
For teachers, Dr. Lister-Sink's method provides a checklist for pianists to prevent buildup of tension while playing the piano. We would like to present these kinesthetic cues while playing to encourage pianists to release unnecessary tension while playing. They are first, maintain kinesthetic awareness. So what we just did with cue sheet 1, that is our way to maintain your kinesthetic awareness. Now that we are in tune with our body, let's continue with our checklist. So first, we release the medial deltoid regularly, so your upper arm right here. So everyone tense your upper arm, mainly your bicep and your tricep. You can feel your muscle tension by placing your free hand on the muscle. Is it tight or is it squishy? Tight. It might be squishy, but it's supposed to be tight. So it should be tight because you're tensing the muscle. Now release. Can you feel that your muscles released? And this is where it's supposed to be squishy. It should be hanging into gravity, and therefore that's why it should be pendulous and free. So now we're going to tune into our forearm. A part of having a released forearm is to release the top muscles, which we call the wrist extensors. The muscles underneath the forearm are called the wrist flexors. So if you remember this by an E, F, alphabetical order, top, down. In order to release the extensors regularly, go back to having a pendulous arm. You might want to swing it around to make sure it's free, but don't hit your neighbor. Then, by keeping that release sensation, lift the forearm with the biceps and let the hand hang slightly to prevent accumulation of extensor tension. Now, everyone tense your forearm. Now release. We can incorporate this release at the end of playing a phrase, such as a 5-finger pattern. This frees the wrist and releases the fingers since they can house hidden tension. Also, it provides natural phrasing. Here's an example of a 5-finger pattern without an easy lift of the wrist, compared to having an easy lift of the wrist. So next in the checklist, we have keeping your wrist free, but moving side to side or up and down. So in other words, release your extensor muscles and let the fingers hang slightly from the wrist like they're a cluster of grapes. You just go side to side and then up and down. We just want to free the wrist of any extra tension and avoid it holding it in a fixed position when we're moving up and down or from finger to finger. Keep in mind that maintaining a low wrist of the keyboard can increase pressure on the median nerve and therefore lead to carpal tunnel syndrome. And that's not what we want. So then next, we rest our non-playing fingers on the keys. So don't waste any extra energy on your upper forearm by holding non-playing fingers in the air. So everyone place your hand on your thigh and lift 2 fingers. And now release. Did you feel the muscles in your forearm activate? This is tension that we don't need, but you would be surprised at how much tension holds in their hands and their fingers. We call it the claw. And then, of course, we continue to observe the breath. So now I will present a musical example for using the Lister Sync method from Bergmüller's Etudes Opus 100, number 2, Arabesque.
So far, we have explained how optimal body alignment and efficient muscle use are the building blocks of proper coordination at the piano. These principles reduce accumulation of muscle tension, diminishing discomfort and injury, and allow the pianist to play with freedom and confidence. Now that we know these principles, how do we communicate them to young students? You may be surprised, but children can pick up on these principles faster than you would think. One reason for this could be that young students typically don't house the same amount of physical tension that adults do. The key to teaching these concepts is to tailor them to the individual student. It often helps to link a certain principle to something that they know.
We have interviewed 3 studio teachers from across the country who have studied with Dr. Lister Sync and teach these principles of injury preventive technique to their own young students. Their names are Dr. Jamie Grigsby of Denver, Colorado, Mrs. Beverly Grace Joy, presently Meisner, from Lynchburg, Virginia, and David Holter from Salem College of North Carolina. We have compiled a list of these ideas from them and have incorporated some of our own, and these are great to target problematic areas in young students in order to make playing more fun.
Once again, we begin with body mapping, and all that students need are simple little cues. And if you have a child who's really interested in anatomy, something that might be helpful is to have an illustrated anatomy book that you can refer to in the lesson. So for sitting and proper alignment, one effective way to make sure that the spine is properly aligned is to give the child a heroic character to mimic. You could say, I use this with my students, sit like a princess. I have them find their sits bones, and sit like a princess or a captain. Their spine is just very tall, and it looks really, really good. And it's a very empowering stance. Like if you try it and have your students do it, sit like a captain or a princess, it's very empowering, and that's what we want.
If you have a student who's overcompensating for a straight back, so their back's like this and they're really rigid, what exercise you can do is the ragdoll exercise. So if everyone wants to participate, you're more than welcome to. Natalie will demonstrate it here at the front. So first, you hang over very loosely and dangle against the floor. Try not to touch the floor, just let it hang loosely. And then, vertebrae by vertebrae, so that's how I describe it at school. We bring our spine up, very slowly, and then you bring your shoulders back, bring your head up, and then all of a sudden you have a very nice natural posture. And then you can have them sit at the bench, and it hopefully stays that way.
We referred to the sits bones earlier, but one thing that you can do is what I had you do earlier, where you do the rocker game. You find your sits bones and then you lean all the way to the left side of the piano, and oh my gosh, you can reach beyond the piano. Look at that range of motion. So that's something they can do. And if they're having a hard time feeling it, pick a hard chair, a hard wooden chair, or a hard surface of a chair, and they will be able to feel those.
Next we have a Hoverman sphere. This is to help them observe their breath. These are really great to visualize breathing. So now you would open it, breathe in, and then breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. And notice that when you breathe in, you're taking in all the tension from the day, and then when you breathe out, your body is suddenly released. And so this is a great visual for students. One, if they're visual learners, or they're very, very distracted, bring this out and you'll have their attention immediately. And if their neck is out of alignment, you can, like if they're like this at the piano, I'm sure we have a lot of students that do this, or like this. Try having them imagine that they're a string puppet, and that you're bringing a string up their head, and then their neck should be perfectly aligned. Also, if they still seem really tense, pretending that they're a bobblehead would be a good visual for them. Just keeping it very, very loose though.
Another effective teaching tool is, and kids love this, they love reversal roles of authority. You're the teacher, I'm the student. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. And they're like, oh my gosh. So, your spine needs to be in alignment, shoulders released. My head, what about my hip joints? Oh, my hip joints. There we go. So that is really informative because they have to recognize it and tell you how to release it or how to be in proper alignment.
And then for students who are tight in general at the piano, one thing that I like to use is to pretend they're like one of those inflatable tube people you see in car lots that go like this. And so, but they're firmly, they're stuck in one place with foundation. So that foundation for us as humans is our sits bones. And so you have them plant their feet and they pretend they're inflatable tube people. And they can be exaggerated just to make sure that they're loose and know that they have a range of motion that they might think is there as before. And then you can limit it to, okay, just the piano.
Another area that we've already mentioned is the shoulders or trapezius. So another tool that you can do if someone doesn't understand the concept of tension release is to say, bring your shoulders as high as they can go. Everyone do it with me. As high as they can go, even more, and release. Whew. Feels good, doesn't it? And one more time. Up and release. And another great word I love is melt. So it's all tense and then melt. It's such a nice word. So that if they don't understand release, just melt. That's a great word.
And we mentioned this earlier, but having swinging pendulous arms is always fun to do when you're like moving around. So just do this. And then another thing you can do is differentiation. So have them tense up specific muscles of the body. So not only are they aware of it at the moment, they can also be aware of how to release it. So everyone tense your fist, release it. Tense your forearm, release it. Bicep, release it. My muscle love that thing. I go to the gym. And then tricep, if you go like this, and release. And then shoulder, release. So do that with your right arm, do it with your left arm, and hopefully you'll be able to understand, oh, like I didn't realize it was this tense before, I gotta loosen it up a bit. Next we have arm alignment. We recommend that at the piano, students should have a 90-degree angle at the bench. Of course, having an adjustable bench is really important for them to do this, and we have little tiny humans that we have to teach, so maybe even then, having your bench at the maximum height isn't enough. One way you can combat this is having a hard foam cushion for them to sit on, or having carpet samples. And just pile them up as high as you need, and then they'll be able to get to the piano with the height they need for their arm. Another visual you can use is having a race car. Natalie, if you come here. So if you're at the piano and you want them to have that nice angle, pretend that there's a race car and this is the bridge. You want the race car to be able to go straight off and not like falling over. That wouldn't be good. So next we have hand alignment, and here the arch is the most important thing to teach. And why is that? The arch is the natural support of the hand, and it's hard to maintain it if the muscles aren't developed, especially in a young pianist. So the arch is composed of the knuckle points, and they're known as the metacarpophalangeal joints, MCP for short. So in order to get this nice alignment and nice arch, use the process of your arm being at your side. And when you hang your arm at your side, notice that there's a natural curve right here that we have, and then you bring it up, and that's your arch. And that's a really good thing to do with students, just have them hang, bring your arm up to the piano.
Another way that you can show this to students is have your hand flat and then tell them to make it like a tent. So they raise that knuckle bridge. Everyone do it with me, flat hand, and then just raise the knuckle bridge. Yeah, make sure it's not too tight because we don't want a tense hand. Just very lightly just raise the tent. Another thing you can do is have something small and light like a ping pong ball and insert it just under the knuckle bridge, and that is another way to show students the arch.
Miss Beverly Meisner in Lynchburg, Virginia has her own little method and device that she uses with her students, and she calls him Henry the Hedgehog. So Henry is a little plush hedgehog that she has to fit under the students' hands, and they're 2 different sizes. And she has a little ring that they place on it, and if you can play with Henry at the piano and not squish notes or have any clusters while playing, that means that you have a nice arch. Unfortunately, we don't have one with us today, but hopefully we have a good visual of me explaining to you his purpose. And another thing you can do is to mold your hand against theirs. So you tell them, well, can you make your hand